ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode number 299. That means next episode is 300, which is kind of awesome. Unfortunately, I don't plan to do anything special for it, but it is a huge milestone in videos. Anyway, we'll talk about it then. And that's actually going to be filmed really soon, because this is extraordinarily late. I apologize for that. I was on vacation, and then I was sick. Still, I am kind of sick, but we're dealing. So, this episode, we're going to talk about countries, which is my abbreviated form of a question by Main Railroad Gaming, who I believe now is mainline.p. And he said, do you go to any countries? Or did you go to any countries? And I assume by that he means other countries, other than the United States or the former United States. And, I mean, the answer's a plain yes. We went to Canada on the regular. I mean, not, all the time, but fairly often. We went to Mexico quite a few times, especially during the beginning and middle of the Zombie Train Incorporated. Sort of towards the crunch and power in our Steam phase. And we went again later on as the war progressed, to assist the military when they were clearing out and establishing a southern border. But the question really gets interesting when we look at countries that I went to overseas. Now, I never personally set foot in Great Britain, or in England, or, the UK in general. We did deal with them on a number of occasions in a number of ways, usually hostile ones. It came down to a number of engagements at sea, including one off the coast of, Massachusetts, and another one sort of in the middle of the Atlantic many years later. The first was actually under the Zombie Train banner, not the Zombie Train Incorporated. The Zombie Train Incorporated event I actually do have written out somewhere, but it was the largest naval battle in the history of the Zombie Train Incorporated. Not to say that that's a particularly large event, but it was that event. This was against a group of naval guys and gals, I suppose, who called themselves the Britons, and their thing, their MO, was they just wanted to keep people off of their islands. They were very isolationist, I suppose. I don't know exactly what their political leanings or ideas were, but I do know that any time we came close, we would get in trouble with them. And it wouldn't even be like word exchanged. It was more of a shoot first, shoot later, shoot some more, and when everyone's dead, everyone's dead. Sort of deal. It was not the kind of thing where we, where we exchanged harsh words. The first time we ever interacted, they had a small frigate, the Trincomalee, which they had taken across the Atlantic in order to take the Constitution out of Boston Harbor. I don't know what they expected to be able to do with that, or how easy they expected it to be, but we got there first. If I recall, it was quite a coincidence, because I don't remember it being coordinated, although they may have known our movements, and they were trying to beat us to it, but we did not know their movements, at least I wasn't personally aware of them. So, we both got there at the same time, more or less. We were on the ship first, they were in the harbor, we had gotten there by train, or we'd gotten close. You can't drive a train right up to the harbor side there, not anymore at least. And we were getting the ship ready to sail. I was on the boat when they showed up, and I stayed on the boat because I went overboard in the Cape Cod Canal to manually drop the bridge in order to keep them from following us, the Cape Cod Canal Railroad Bridge. That was the first interaction with the Britons. Again, they came out of the harbor while we were getting ready to sail. We had an improvised set of sails, having acquired a sail plan. This wasn't me. This wasn't the zombie train. This was the Islanders doing this. The Republic of Block Island. And also, that there was a huge sort of political spat in there with the people in Quonset, which were Donatios people, and I cannot recall their name. They were wiped off the face of the map, basically, during the Islander War, which mostly happened when I was gone, when I was on the other side of the country. But there was Donatios people, and then there were the Islanders. Donatio was upset that I was siding with the Islanders. He had Quonset Point, and we had to find a way around that. Again, most of the war began while I was in Portland, well, and the West Coast in general, but it did not end until a while after I got back. And during that stretch of time, we had to basically create some rather innovative workarounds for getting ships to the island and back, at least for ports in Rhode Island, which included reconstructing a couple sections of track and fixing a couple of bridges. But anyway, that was the Zombie Train's first major infrastructure project. And at least it was the largest at the time. But anyway, yeah, we took off out of the harbor, and by took off, I mean lumbered, because it's the Constitution, and we didn't really have a favorable wind. They came in pretty quickly, if I recall correctly. Again, we didn't really know they were coming. At least I didn't. Maybe the Islanders knew, but the Zombie Train people did not. We shooed the train away. I stayed behind on the boat with a couple of people from the train that were more knowledgeable with ships, so we could actually help. And we got the ship out. Let's see. Yeah, I shooed the train away, which meant we did have a backup engineer. I don't remember who that was, but it wasn't somebody from the train. Yeah, because then when we got to the pass, we didn't have a backup engineer. Anyway, sorry, distracted. Going off on tangents, but that's what we do here. We got out of the harbor with minimal damage. They were firing cannons at us, but they didn't want to sink the ship because they wanted it. They tried to board us. They had better draft than we did, so we were actually kind of limited. But they got in, they sort of boxed us in, the wind turned favorable to us, we were able to break away a little bit. They chased us south into the Cape Cod Canal, and I didn't even know if the bridge was up, and I knew it was going to be a problem. Thankfully the bridge was up, and I got off the boat, and by got off I mean leapt off the boat, swam to shore, and dropped the bridge manually in front of the Trincomalee. No damage to that ship, not as far as I'm aware. I think, well actually no, I take that back, there might have been minor damage to that ship, but it's not like I dropped it on the middle of the deck. I would have felt bad, honestly. They were trying to shoot at us, but that's a beautiful ship. So, that was our first interaction with the Britons. There were a couple of more interactions where they had other ships, and they had, or, the same ship sometimes, and they raided the East Coast, raided our shipping. We went over there a couple of times. This is where the countries thing sort of comes in. We went over there, and I don't know exactly where we were. I think it might have been the south coast of France, but it might have been Greece. It was close to an existing oil refinery on the coast. It was on the northern coast of the Mediterranean, but I know it wasn't Italy. The people that were there were in trouble with the Russians, which the Russians were fairly cohesive throughout the entire World War Z. At the beginning, obviously, everyone was a little bit panicked and broken up, but you can read about this in World War Z. The tactics that they employed internally to keep everything straight were drastic and not necessarily out of character for the Russians, I would suppose. I don't know, it was a big deal then. It's still kind of a big deal now. People talk about it. But that's not my area of expertise. we didn't go into Russia. We went into one of these countries. Again, I can't remember if it was France or it was Greece, but it was one of the two. And we had 3 ships. We had 3 ships. We had the Constitution, we had the Olympia, which had just recently been sort of fixed up, patched up. Wasn't in the best of shape, but was in good running order, which is more than you could say for the last, many decades for that ship. And we had the Liberty ship, the John W. Brown. This is the East Coast Liberty ship. This is the one that we had to do some retrofitting on because it had been converted pretty thoroughly into a museum ship and didn't continue to exist as like an active. It had been modified more than the other one had. The other one was actually, I think at this point in time it was en route, but due to the war, they couldn't come through the Panama Canal, so they had to go around. They had to go around Cape Horn. And they had, if I recall correctly, pretty much stuffed themselves with coal for that trip. Coal and other supplies, because that's a long trip to make. And they're in a slow cargo ship. Not to say that they were actually that slow. They were actually the slowest ship of the convoy, if I recall correctly, but they could make like 11 knots. Which was really close to basically Constitution's theoretical top speed with a good wind, which is like 12 or 13 knots. We had a really good wind going out there, I think, and that's normally the harder direction. No, that's the easier direction because you're with the Gulf Stream. I don't remember. But either way, we had an easier time going there than coming back, which is why we were able to get caught coming back. We had these 3 ships. So I don't think the Britons knew about us. No, they might have. They might have known about us coming. They knew about us when we got into the Mediterranean, because they tried to come after us with a destroyer that was being towed by another ship, because the destroyer didn't have any fuel. But they tried to get us with that. We managed to evade them, get into where we were going. I don't think they knew where we were going, but they pulled back to, like, the Strait of Gibraltar to wait for us. There was another battle there, which was fairly lopsided again because they were doing something very cumbersome, and they didn't have their full sailing fleet. I don't know where it was. But then they chased us down on the high seas with 2 frigates and the Warrior, which I think I've brought that ship up before. My only speculation, and this is from hearing things from other sources, is that they cannibalized a bunch of steam engines to get the boilers for it. I don't know why. I don't know why they thought it was that important. I don't know if there were actually other powers that were trying to invade them, or they were using it basically as a show of force on their own people. I'm projecting a lot onto these guys, assuming they're sort of the force for good around the UK. And really, I have no idea. I don't know about the internal politics of the UK during the war. So these guys might have been a group of vigilantes that were raiding commerce in coastal towns, and that's why they needed big ships. But they also might have been sort of a naval defense force, because, well, just like every country, Great Britain was kind of in shambles. So, I don't know. Yeah, huge amounts of speculation. I know most of continental Europe was basically screwed. It has a much higher population density than most of the US, and the US was totally screwed. So, that was a problem. It pretty much, again, it like emptied mainland Europe. Western Europe and Southern Europe were toast. Eastern Europe, less so, a lot because of the cold. That helped them. Northern Europe, same thing. And because it's a little bit sparser, although I understand that a lot of the coastal cities had problems with zombies. But one thing that sticks out at me is I think Amsterdam had a relatively easy time with all the canals and stuff. But anyway, water around zombies is a blessing and a curse. They sink to the bottom, they can climb up. Anyway, that's something for the history books. But I don't really have too many other answers to this question. Again, if you want a better picture of how the world was working, check out World War Z by Max Brooks. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Trainman out.